Question 1. Quality control measures reveal a minor but persistent deviation in the fuel consumption monitoring system on a Nippon Yusen vessel, potentially impacting accurate emissions reporting. The deviation has been noted for several voyages. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the vessel's chief engineer? Option A. Continue monitoring the system and gather more data over the next few voyages to confirm the extent of the issue before reporting. Option B. Immediately report the deviation to the fleet technical manager and the designated compliance officer, providing all relevant data for assessment and investigation. Option C. Discuss the issue informally with the captain and decide on a course of action based on their experience, without immediate formal reporting. Option D. Adjust operational parameters slightly to compensate for the deviation, aiming to bring emissions reporting within acceptable historical ranges, without formal notification. Correct answer is B. Immediately report the deviation to the fleet technical manager and the designated compliance officer, providing all relevant data for assessment and investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential conflict between immediate operational pressures and the long-term integrity of Nippon Yusen's operations and reputation. The discovery of a quality control issue that could impact safety or compliance requires immediate and ethical consideration. The challenge lies in balancing the need for transparency and adherence to regulations with the potential for operational disruption and financial implications. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen course of action upholds Nippon Yusen's commitment to safety, environmental responsibility, and regulatory compliance, as mandated by relevant maritime laws and industry best practices. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the quality control issue through the established internal channels and cooperating fully with any subsequent investigations. This upholds the principle of transparency and accountability, which are fundamental to maritime safety regulations and ethical business conduct. By proactively addressing the issue, Nippon Yusen demonstrates its commitment to identifying and rectifying problems, thereby mitigating potential risks to its vessels, crew, and the environment. This aligns with the overarching goal of ensuring safe and efficient maritime operations, a core tenet of responsible shipping companies. An incorrect approach of downplaying or concealing the quality control issue would be a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This would violate principles of honesty and integrity, potentially leading to unsafe operating conditions, environmental damage, and significant legal repercussions for Nippon Yusen. Furthermore, it undermines the trust placed in the company by regulatory bodies, clients, and the public. Another incorrect approach of delaying reporting to conduct a full internal investigation without informing relevant authorities or stakeholders could also be problematic. While thorough investigation is important, an undue delay in reporting a potentially significant issue can be interpreted as an attempt to obscure facts or avoid scrutiny, which is contrary to the spirit of regulatory compliance and responsible corporate behavior. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. This involves first understanding the nature and potential impact of the discovered issue. Next, they should consult relevant internal policies and external regulations. The framework should then guide them to report the issue promptly through appropriate channels, cooperate with investigations, and ensure that corrective actions are taken. Transparency, accountability, and a commitment to safety and compliance should be the guiding principles throughout the process. Question 2. The performance metrics show a significant, albeit temporary, dip in operational efficiency for a key Nippon Yusen shipping route. While the immediate financial impact is manageable, the underlying cause is not immediately apparent and could potentially indicate a systemic issue. What is the most responsible course of action for the operations manager? Option A. Highlight positive performance indicators from other routes in internal reports to maintain an overall positive impression of the company's performance. Option B. Implement immediate, across-the-board cost-cutting measures on the affected route to restore profitability without a full understanding of the performance issue. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to identify the root cause of the performance dip, document findings, and propose corrective actions, while also preparing for potential disclosure if regulatory thresholds are met. Option D. Attribute the dip solely to seasonal market fluctuations and external shipping congestion, and focus on optimizing other routes to offset the impact. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to identify the root cause of the performance dip, document findings, and propose corrective actions, while also preparing for potential disclosure if regulatory thresholds are met. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet performance targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential issues. Careful judgment is required to ensure that short-term gains do not lead to long-term reputational damage or legal repercussions for Nippon Yusen. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and proactive risk management. This means acknowledging the performance dip, investigating its root causes thoroughly, and communicating findings and proposed solutions internally and, if necessary, externally, in accordance with Nippon Yusen's reporting obligations and relevant maritime regulations. This upholds ethical principles of honesty and accountability, and ensures compliance with any disclosure requirements mandated by maritime authorities or financial regulations applicable to Nippon Yusen. An incorrect approach of downplaying the performance metrics and attributing them solely to external factors without a thorough internal investigation would be ethically unsound. It risks misleading stakeholders and failing to address underlying operational inefficiencies or safety concerns, which could have serious consequences. This approach violates the ethical duty of candor and could lead to non-compliance with reporting standards. Another incorrect approach of immediately implementing drastic, unverified cost-cutting measures without understanding the performance dip's cause is also professionally unacceptable. While cost control is important, making decisions without a clear understanding of the problem can exacerbate issues, potentially compromise safety or operational integrity, and ultimately harm Nippon Yusen's long-term viability. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to act responsibly. A third incorrect approach of selectively reporting positive performance indicators while omitting the negative ones is a clear breach of ethical conduct and potentially regulatory requirements. This misrepresentation can lead to flawed decision-making by management and investors and erodes trust. It is fundamentally dishonest and undermines the integrity of Nippon Yusen's operations and reporting. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Fact-finding. Gather all relevant data and understand the situation comprehensively. 2. Ethical assessment. Evaluate potential actions against established ethical principles and company values. 3. Regulatory review. Identify and adhere to all applicable laws, regulations, and industry standards. 4. Stakeholder consideration. Understand the impact of decisions on all relevant parties. 5. Proactive communication. Be transparent and communicate findings and plans appropriately. Question 3. The control framework reveals potential inefficiencies in Nippon Yusen's current container loading and manifest generation process. Which of the following approaches best addresses these inefficiencies while upholding regulatory compliance and operational integrity? Option A. Focus solely on reducing the time spent on manifest generation by using pre-filled templates without verifying the accuracy of the data against actual cargo loaded. Option B. Implement a new digital manifest system that integrates directly with the loading schedule, automating data entry and cross-referencing for accuracy, after a thorough review of its compliance with Nippon Yusen's internal data security policies and relevant maritime documentation standards. Option C. Rely on the experience of long-serving dock supervisors to identify and implement minor adjustments to the loading sequence to improve flow. Without formal documentation or review. Option D. Expedite the loading process by reducing the number of verification checks on container contents against the manifest, assuming the accuracy of information provided by third-party logistics providers. The correct answer is B. Implement a new digital manifest system that integrates directly with the loading schedule, automating data entry and cross-referencing for accuracy, after a thorough review of its compliance with Nippon Yusen's internal data security policies and relevant maritime documentation standards. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to the Nippon Yusen's internal compliance policies and potentially relevant maritime regulations concerning cargo handling and documentation. The pressure to expedite operations can create a temptation to bypass established procedures, which could lead to significant compliance breaches, financial penalties, or reputational damage for Nippon Yusen. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement process improvements that enhance efficiency without compromising integrity. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing cargo handling and documentation processes at Nippon Yusen, identifying bottlenecks, and proposing data-driven, compliant solutions. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and operational risk management, which are implicitly expected in a hiring assessment for a company like Nippon Yusen. By focusing on documented procedures and regulatory adherence, this approach ensures that any proposed optimizations are sustainable and do not introduce new compliance risks. It demonstrates an understanding of the importance of a robust control framework in preventing errors and ensuring the integrity of Nippon Yusen's operations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over documented procedures risks violating Nippon Yusen's internal control policies and potentially international maritime conventions or national regulations governing shipping and cargo. For instance, bypassing verification steps in documentation could lead to misdeclarations, impacting customs compliance and potentially leading to fines or seizure of goods. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on process integrity could inadvertently lead to understaffing or inadequate training, increasing the likelihood of errors and noncompliance. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal experience without rigorous analysis fails to provide a defensible basis for change and may overlook critical control points, thereby undermining the overall control framework of Nippon Yusen. Professionals should approach process optimization by first understanding the existing control framework and regulatory landscape. This involves thorough research, consultation with relevant stakeholders, and a data-driven assessment of current processes. Any proposed changes must be evaluated against compliance requirements and potential risks. A structured approach, such as a pilot program or phased implementation, allows for monitoring and adjustment, ensuring that efficiency gains are achieved without sacrificing compliance or operational integrity for Nippon Yusen. Question 4. The control framework reveals that a proposed optimization initiative within Nippon Yusen's fleet management operations aims to streamline vessel maintenance scheduling by leveraging advanced predictive analytics. However, concerns have been raised regarding the potential impact on existing safety reporting protocols and the adequacy of data validation procedures for the new analytical models. Which approach best addresses these concerns while pursuing process optimization? Option A. Prioritize the cost-saving aspects of the optimization, assuming that existing safety protocols are robust enough to absorb any minor deviations introduced by the new scheduling system. Option B. Proceed with the optimization initiative immediately to realize efficiency gains, with a plan to address any compliance issues that arise post-implementation. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment and impact analysis involving Nippon Yusen's compliance and safety departments to validate the predictive models and ensure integration with existing reporting protocols before full implementation. Option D. Implement the optimization using the predictive analytics tool directly, relying on the vendor's assurance of compliance and bypassing internal review processes to expedite deployment. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the optimization initiative immediately to realize efficiency gains, with a plan to address any compliance issues that arise post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing efficiency gains with the potential for unintended consequences that could impact Nippon Yusen's compliance and operational integrity. The need to optimize processes within a large organization like Nippon Yusen necessitates a thorough understanding of how changes might affect existing control mechanisms and adherence to relevant maritime regulations and internal policies. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency improvements do not inadvertently create new risks or undermine established compliance procedures. The correct approach involves a systematic review and validation of the proposed process optimization by the relevant compliance and risk management teams at Nippon Yusen. This ensures that any changes are assessed against the company's established control framework, which would include adherence to maritime safety regulations, environmental protection guidelines, and internal operational standards. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes a risk-based methodology, ensuring that potential negative impacts are identified and mitigated before implementation. It aligns with the ethical responsibility of Nippon Yusen to maintain safe and compliant operations, safeguarding its reputation and stakeholders. Implementing process changes without adequate oversight by compliance and risk management teams represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to non-compliance with maritime laws, potentially resulting in fines, operational disruptions, or reputational damage. A second incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on operational controls, also poses a risk. This could compromise safety procedures or environmental standards, leading to severe consequences. A third incorrect approach, which involves bypassing established internal approval processes for efficiency gains, undermines the integrity of Nippon Yusen's governance structure and could lead to the adoption of suboptimal or risky practices. Professionals at Nippon Yusen should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the objective, process optimization. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of potential impacts on compliance, safety, and operational efficiency, involving relevant stakeholders, including compliance and risk management. Proposed changes should then be evaluated against the company's control framework and regulatory obligations. Finally, implementation should only proceed after obtaining necessary approvals and establishing monitoring mechanisms to ensure ongoing adherence and effectiveness. Question 5. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern in the fuel consumption data for a specific Nippon Yusen vessel, suggesting a potential deviation from standard operational parameters. Which of the following actions best addresses this situation while adhering to Nippon Yusen's commitment to regulatory compliance and operational excellence? Option A. Initiate an immediate review of the vessel's operational logs and maintenance records, cross-referencing the monitoring system's findings with established fuel efficiency benchmarks and relevant maritime environmental regulations to identify the root cause and determine appropriate corrective actions. Option B. Instruct the vessel's crew to manually override the monitoring system's alert for fuel consumption, attributing the deviation to minor fluctuations in sea conditions. Option C. Temporarily adjust the vessel's operational schedule to reduce fuel expenditure until the monitoring system's anomaly is resolved, without further investigation into the cause. Option D. Focus solely on identifying potential cost savings in other operational areas of the vessel to offset any perceived increase in fuel costs, disregarding the specific fuel consumption anomaly. Correct answer is A. Initiate an immediate review of the vessel's operational logs and maintenance records, cross-referencing the monitoring system's findings with established fuel efficiency benchmarks and relevant maritime environmental regulations to identify the root cause and determine appropriate corrective actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct within Nippon Yusen's operations. The core difficulty lies in identifying and rectifying potential process inefficiencies that might inadvertently lead to non-compliance or ethical breaches, without compromising safety or service quality. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between minor deviations and significant risks that necessitate immediate intervention. The correct approach involves a systematic review and validation of the monitoring system's findings against Nippon Yusen's established operational procedures and relevant maritime regulations. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes data integrity and regulatory alignment. By cross-referencing the system's alerts with documented procedures and regulatory requirements, it ensures that any identified discrepancies are addressed in a manner that upholds both internal standards and external legal obligations. This methodical validation process prevents hasty decisions based on potentially incomplete or misinterpreted data, thereby safeguarding Nippon Yusen from regulatory penalties and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without verifying the root cause of the monitoring system's alerts is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for regulatory compliance. If the alerts indicate potential safety or environmental risks, ignoring them for cost savings directly contravenes maritime safety regulations and environmental protection laws, potentially leading to severe consequences. Another incorrect approach that involves overriding the monitoring system's alerts based on anecdotal evidence or personal experience, without a formal investigation or documented justification, is also professionally unsound. This bypasses established control mechanisms and introduces subjective bias into operational decision-making. Such an action undermines the integrity of the monitoring system, which is designed to provide objective insights, and can lead to the overlooking of critical issues that require regulatory attention. This demonstrates a failure to follow established protocols for anomaly investigation and resolution, which are crucial for maintaining operational integrity and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the findings of the monitoring system. Second, consult relevant internal policies, procedures, and applicable maritime regulations. Third, conduct a fact-based investigation to determine the root cause of any identified anomalies. Fourth, implement corrective actions that are both effective in addressing the issue and compliant with all regulatory requirements. Finally, document all findings, decisions, and actions taken for audit and future reference. Question 6. The control framework reveals that a proposed process optimization initiative at Nippon Yusen aims to streamline cargo handling procedures to reduce turnaround times in port. However, initial assessments suggest that the proposed changes might necessitate modifications to existing safety equipment placement and emergency response protocols. Considering the absolute priority of safety and regulatory compliance in maritime operation, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for Nippon Yusen? Option A. Immediately halt the optimization initiative and revert to the existing procedures, deeming any deviation from current safety protocols as an unacceptable risk, regardless of potential efficiency gains. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed changes against all relevant international maritime regulations, Nippon Yusen's internal safety policies, and flag state requirements, seeking expert consultation and formal approval before any implementation. Option C. Implement the process optimization with a focus on cost reduction, and delegate the responsibility of ensuring regulatory compliance to the operational crew on board the vessels. Option D. Proceed with the process optimization as planned, assuming that the benefits of reduced turnaround times outweigh potential minor adjustments to safety protocols, and address any regulatory concerns post-implementation. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the process optimization as planned, assuming that the benefits of reduced turnaround times outweigh potential minor adjustments to safety protocols, and address any regulatory concerns post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen employees involved in process optimization due to the inherent tension between efficiency gains and the strict adherence to maritime regulations and safety protocols. The need to balance cost reduction with the absolute priority of safety and compliance requires careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape. The correct approach involves a systematic review and validation of proposed process changes against all applicable Nippon Yusen internal policies, international maritime conventions, such as SOLAS, MARPOL, and flag state regulations. This ensures that any optimization does not compromise safety, environmental protection, or operational integrity. The justification for this approach lies in the paramount importance of maritime safety and environmental stewardship, which are non-negotiable. Regulatory bodies and classification societies mandate strict adherence to established standards, and any deviation, even for efficiency, must be rigorously assessed and approved through established channels to ensure compliance and mitigate risks. An incorrect approach would be to implement process changes based solely on projected cost savings, without a comprehensive regulatory impact assessment. This fails to acknowledge the legal and ethical obligations to operate vessels safely and in an environmentally responsible manner. Such an approach risks significant penalties, operational disruptions, reputational damage, and most importantly, endangerment of life and the marine environment. Another incorrect approach is to bypass established internal approval processes for optimization initiatives. This undermines the control framework designed to ensure due diligence and compliance, creating a loophole for potentially non-compliant or unsafe practices to be adopted. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. identifying the proposed process change and its objectives. 2. Conducting a thorough review of all relevant regulations, internal policies, and industry best practices. 3. Performing a risk assessment to identify potential safety, environmental, or operational impacts. 4. Seeking expert consultation and obtaining necessary approvals from relevant departments and authorities. 5. Documenting the entire process, including the rationale for the decision and any mitigation measures. Question 7. Upon reviewing the recent delays in processing export documentation for a critical Nippon Yusen client, what is the most effective and compliant approach to optimize this process? Option A. Instruct the documentation team to prioritize this client's paperwork above all others, even if it means temporarily reducing checks on other shipments. Option B. Focus solely on accelerating the physical loading and departure of the vessel, assuming documentation issues can be resolved post-shipment. Option C. Implement a digital document management system integrated with customs pre-clearance modules and conduct cross-departmental training on its use. Option D. Authorize the operations team to bypass certain standard verification steps for this client's documentation to expedite submission. The correct answer is C. Implement a digital document management system integrated with customs pre-clearance modules and conduct cross-departmental training on its use. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to Nippon Yusen's internal policies and potentially international maritime regulations concerning cargo handling and documentation. The pressure to expedite a shipment, especially for a key client, can create a temptation to bypass established procedures, which could lead to significant compliance risks. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement process improvements that enhance speed without compromising safety, accuracy, or regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing documentation workflow to identify bottlenecks and redundancies, followed by the implementation of digital solutions and cross-departmental training. This method is correct because it directly addresses the root causes of delays by leveraging technology and improving internal communication and understanding of procedures. Nippon Yusen, as a global shipping company, operates under a complex web of international maritime laws, port state control regulations, and its own stringent internal compliance frameworks. Streamlining processes in this manner ensures that documentation is accurate, timely, and compliant with all applicable rules, thereby mitigating risks of fines, cargo delays, or reputational damage. This approach aligns with the ethical imperative to conduct business with integrity and diligence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on expediting the physical movement of cargo without addressing the underlying documentation issues is professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to incomplete or inaccurate paperwork, increasing the risk of customs holds, penalties, or disputes, and failing to comply with the meticulous record-keeping requirements mandated by maritime authorities and trade agreements. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing standard approval processes for documentation, even with the intention of speed, is ethically flawed and violates internal control policies. This creates a significant compliance risk, as unverified or improperly authorized documents can lead to errors that have far-reaching consequences, including potential safety hazards or financial misstatements. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the full scope of the problem, including its operational and compliance dimensions. This involves consulting relevant internal policies, regulatory guidelines, and seeking input from all affected departments. The goal should be to identify solutions that are both efficient and compliant, rather than opting for shortcuts that introduce unacceptable risks. A thorough risk assessment should be conducted for any proposed change, ensuring that the benefits of speed do not outweigh the potential for compliance failures. Question 8. The control framework reveals that Nippon Yusen is seeking to optimize its cargo handling procedures to improve turnaround times in port. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with regulatory compliance and ethical considerations? Option A. Reducing the number of preloading safety checks to speed up the process, based on the assumption that experienced crew members can identify potential issues without formal checklists. Option B. Expediting the approval process for new equipment by relying on previous certifications from unrelated projects, assuming similar safety standards apply. Option C. Implementing a new, faster loading system based on a vendor's recommendation without a full review of its compliance with the International Maritime Dangerous Goods (IMG) code and relevant port authority regulations. Option D. Conducting a thorough review of current cargo handling workflows, cross-referencing them with Nippon Yusen's internal safety manuals, the IMG code, and the specific regulations of the ports where operations occur, to identify areas for improvement that maintain or enhance safety and compliance. The correct answer is C. Implementing a new, faster loading system based on a vendor's recommendation without a full review of its compliance with the International Maritime Dangerous Goods (IMG) code and relevant port authority regulations. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Nippon Yusen, as a global shipping company, operates within a complex web of international and national regulations governing safety, environmental protection, and operational efficiency. The pressure to optimize processes, while beneficial for business, must be balanced against strict adherence to these frameworks. A failure to do so can lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, compromise the safety of personnel and the environment. Careful judgment is required to identify process improvements that are not only efficient but also compliant and ethically sound. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing operational procedures against the latest Nippon Yusen internal guidelines and relevant international maritime regulations, such as those set by the International Maritime Organization (IMO) and national flag state authorities. This approach prioritizes identifying inefficiencies that can be addressed through procedural adjustments, technology adoption, or enhanced training, all while ensuring full compliance. The regulatory and ethical justification lies in the fundamental duty of care owed by Nippon Yusen to its employees, the public, and the environment. Adhering to established regulations is not merely a legal obligation, but an ethical imperative to prevent accidents and minimize environmental impact. An approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without a comprehensive compliance check is professionally unacceptable. This would involve implementing changes that might appear efficient on the surface, but could inadvertently violate safety protocols or environmental standards, leading to regulatory breaches. For instance, altering maintenance schedules to save time or resources without considering the mandated inspection intervals stipulated by maritime authorities would be a direct violation. Similarly, adopting new technologies without verifying their compliance with emission standards or safety certifications would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass established reporting mechanisms for operational issues in the name of speed. This undermines transparency and the ability of Nippon Yusen to proactively manage risks and comply with reporting requirements mandated by regulatory bodies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the objective, process optimization. This should be immediately followed by a comprehensive assessment of the regulatory landscape relevant to the proposed changes. A risk-based approach is crucial, where potential compliance gaps and ethical implications are identified and mitigated before any implementation. Consultation with legal and compliance departments, as well as relevant operational experts, is essential to ensure that proposed optimizations are both effective and fully compliant. The ultimate decision should be guided by the principle of compliance first, ensuring that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of safety, environmental integrity, or legal standing. Question 9. The control framework reveals that a key operational process at Nippon Yusen is experiencing recurring delays. To optimize this process, which of the following approaches would best align with the company's commitment to efficient and compliant operations? Option A. Prioritize cost-saving measures by reducing the resources allocated to the process, regardless of potential impact on efficiency or quality. Option B. Rely on informal feedback from a few long-serving employees to make immediate adjustments to the workflow. Option C. Conduct a thorough analysis of current process data to identify specific bottlenecks, then design and implement targeted improvements with measurable outcomes. Option D. Implement changes suggested by the most vocal department head, assuming their experience will lead to the quickest resolution. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough analysis of current process data to identify specific bottlenecks, then design and implement targeted improvements with measurable outcomes. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen employees by requiring them to balance operational efficiency with adherence to established control frameworks, specifically concerning process optimization. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method to improve a critical operational process without compromising regulatory integrity or introducing new risks. Careful judgment is required to discern between superficial changes and substantive improvements that align with Nippon Yusen's internal policies and any relevant maritime industry regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic review and data-driven analysis of the existing process to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies, followed by the implementation of targeted improvements with clear metrics for success. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that process optimization is not merely a cosmetic change, but a genuine enhancement that contributes to operational excellence and risk mitigation. Regulatory justification stems from the implicit requirement within most corporate governance frameworks, including those likely governing a company like Nippon Yusen, to maintain efficient and effective operations, which in turn supports compliance with safety and operational standards. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to responsible business practices and continuous improvement. Implementing a solution based solely on anecdotal evidence or the loudest voice within a team represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Anecdotal evidence lacks the rigor required for informed decision-making and can lead to the implementation of ineffective or even detrimental changes, potentially violating internal control policies that mandate evidence-based improvements. Relying on the loudest voice bypasses objective analysis and can lead to biased decisions, neglecting critical aspects of the process and potentially overlooking compliance risks. This approach fails to uphold the principles of fairness and objectivity expected in professional settings. Adopting a solution that prioritizes immediate cost reduction without a thorough understanding of its impact on process integrity or compliance is another regulatory and ethical failure. Such an approach risks creating downstream problems, increasing the likelihood of errors, or even leading to noncompliance with operational or safety regulations, which could have severe consequences for Nippon Yusen. It demonstrates a short-sighted perspective that prioritizes immediate financial gains over long-term operational stability and regulatory adherence. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and the desired outcome. Second, gather relevant data and information about the current process. Third, analyze this data to identify root causes of inefficiency or risk. Fourth, brainstorm potential solutions, evaluating each against criteria such as effectiveness, feasibility, cost, and regulatory compliance. Fifth, select the most appropriate solution based on this comprehensive evaluation. Finally, implement the chosen solution, monitor its performance, and be prepared to make further adjustments as needed. This systematic methodology ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both operational goals and regulatory requirements. Question 10. Examination of the data shows that Nippon Yusen is seeking to optimize its fleet's fuel consumption and reduce operational turnaround times at ports. Which of the following approaches best balances these objectives with regulatory compliance and ethical operational standards? Option A. Implementing a new fuel-efficient engine technology that requires modifications to existing emissions monitoring systems, with the understanding that full regulatory recalibration will be addressed in a subsequent phase. Option B. Negotiating with port authorities to relax certain environmental reporting requirements in exchange for guaranteed faster vessel turnaround times for Nippon Yusen's fleet. Option C. Expediting cargo loading and unloading procedures by reducing pre-operation safety checks and crew oversight to meet tighter port schedules. Option D. Developing and deploying an advanced route optimization software that considers weather patterns and port congestion, while also incorporating real-time regulatory compliance checks for emissions and waste disposal at each port of call. The correct answer is A. Implementing a new fuel-efficient engine technology that requires modifications to existing emissions monitoring systems, with the understanding that full regulatory recalibration will be addressed in a subsequent phase. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen employees tasked with optimizing operational processes. The core difficulty lies in balancing efficiency gains with strict adherence to maritime regulations and ethical conduct, particularly concerning environmental protection and safety. A hasty or purely cost-driven approach could inadvertently lead to non-compliance, reputational damage, and potential legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any process optimization aligns with Nippon Yusen's commitment to responsible maritime operations and international standards. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks, and proposing solutions that not only improve efficiency, but also demonstrably enhance safety and environmental compliance. This includes consulting relevant maritime regulations, such as those pertaining to emissions control, waste management, and navigational safety, and ensuring that any proposed changes are thoroughly vetted against these requirements. Ethical considerations, such as the impact on crew welfare and the company's broader sustainability goals, must also be integrated. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility, which are paramount in the maritime industry. It reflects a commitment to operational excellence that is both efficient and sustainable, safeguarding Nippon Yusen's reputation and long-term viability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. For instance, implementing a new fuel management system that bypasses mandatory emissions monitoring or reporting requirements would violate environmental regulations and expose Nippon Yusen to significant penalties. Similarly, an approach that streamlines cargo handling procedures at the expense of safety protocols, such as reducing pre-stowage inspections, would contravene safety regulations and increase the risk of accidents. Another flawed approach might involve adopting new technologies without adequate crew training or risk assessment, potentially leading to operational errors and safety hazards, which would be a failure in due diligence and responsible management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the operational context and regulatory landscape. This involves proactive engagement with compliance departments, risk management teams, and relevant stakeholders when evaluating process optimization proposals. A systematic assessment of potential impacts on safety, environmental performance, and regulatory adherence should be conducted. Prioritizing solutions that offer a clear benefit across efficiency, safety, and compliance, rather than focusing on a single metric, is crucial for making sound professional judgments in complex operational environments like those at Nippon Yusen. Question 11. Assessment of Nippon Yusen's strategy to optimize vessel turnaround times at major international ports, considering the need to enhance operational efficiency while strictly adhering to international maritime regulations and environmental standards. Option A. Implement new digital cargo tracking systems to improve inventory management without assessing their potential impact on existing vessel safety management systems, SMS, as required by the ISM code. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of current port call procedures, identify inefficiencies, and propose modifications that improve vessel turnaround time, ensuring all proposed changes are compliant with MARPOL Annex VI and relevant national port state control requirements. Option C. Expedite cargo discharge procedures at all ports to minimize vessel dwell times, without specific checks for compliance with MARPOL Annex VI emission control areas or local environmental permits. Option D. Prioritize cost reduction in port services by selecting the cheapest providers, without conducting due diligence on their adherence to labor laws and safe working conditions for port staff. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of current port call procedures, identify inefficiencies, and propose modifications that improve vessel turnaround time, ensuring all proposed changes are compliant with MARPOL Annex VI and relevant national port state control requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Nippon Yusen is navigating a complex global shipping environment where efficiency gains are paramount for competitiveness and sustainability. Implementing process optimization initiatives, such as streamlining port operations or improving cargo handling, presents a significant challenge. This challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of operational excellence with adherence to stringent international maritime regulation, labor laws, and environmental standards. A failure to integrate these compliance requirements into optimization plans can lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Therefore, a nuanced approach that prioritizes regulatory adherence alongside efficiency is crucial. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of existing port call procedures at Nippon Yusen's key hubs, identifying bottlenecks and proposing modifications that enhance vessel turnaround time, while explicitly incorporating checks for compliance with the International Maritime Organization's IMO MARPOL Annex VI regulation regarding sulfur oxide emissions and the relevant national port state control requirements. This approach is correct because it proactively embeds regulatory compliance within the optimization process by ensuring that proposed changes do not violate MARPOL Annex VI or local port regulations. Nippon Yusen mitigates legal risks and avoids potential fines or operational delays that could negate any efficiency gains. This demonstrates a commitment to responsible shipping practices, aligning with industry best practices and ethical corporate conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on reducing port dwell times by expediting cargo discharge without verifying compliance with MARPOL Annex VI emission control areas or local environmental permits is professionally unacceptable. This failure to integrate regulatory checks creates a significant risk of noncompliance, potentially leading to substantial fines and operational sanctions. Another incorrect approach would be to implement new digital tracking systems for cargo to improve inventory management, but without considering how these systems might interface with or impact existing vessel safety management systems, SMS, as required by the International Safety Management (ISM) Code. This oversight could lead to unintended safety risks or operational conflicts, violating the core principles of the ISM Code. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost reduction in port services by selecting the cheapest providers without conducting due diligence on their adherence to labor laws and safe working conditions for port staff is ethically and legally flawed. This disregard for labor standards can result in legal disputes, worker exploitation claims, and damage to Nippon Yusen's reputation as a responsible employer. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Nippon Yusen should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the operational objective. This is followed by a comprehensive scan of all applicable regulatory frameworks, including international conventions like MARPOL and ISM Code, national laws, and local port regulations. Potential process changes should then be evaluated against these regulatory requirements. Risk assessments should be conducted to identify any compliance gaps or potential conflicts. The chosen optimization strategy must demonstrably satisfy both operational efficiency goals and all relevant legal and ethical obligations. This integrated approach ensures sustainable and responsible business operations. Question 12. Which approach would be most appropriate for Nippon Yusen to adopt when seeking to optimize its cargo handling procedures to improve efficiency and reduce operational costs? Option A. Relying on established practices and the experience of long-serving employees to guide process improvements, without conducting a formal review of current regulatory requirements. Option B. Expediting the implementation of new procedures to gain a competitive advantage, with regulatory compliance being addressed as a secondary concern after the initial rollout. Option C. Prioritizing the adoption of the cheapest available technologies and methods, assuming they will inherently lead to cost savings and efficiency without requiring extensive regulatory checks. Option D. Implementing changes based on a thorough review of current operational data, followed by a comprehensive assessment of proposed optimizations against all relevant maritime regulations and Nippon Yusen's internal safety and environmental guidelines. The correct answer is D. Implementing changes based on a thorough review of current operational data, followed by a comprehensive assessment of proposed optimizations against all relevant maritime regulations and Nippon Yusen's internal safety and environmental guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen employees tasked with optimizing operational processes. The challenge lies in balancing efficiency gains with the stringent regulatory compliance required in the maritime industry, particularly concerning safety and environmental protection. A hasty or purely cost-driven optimization could inadvertently lead to noncompliance, risking severe penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, compromising the safety of personnel and the environment. Therefore, careful judgment is required to ensure that process improvements align with all applicable regulations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then proposing solutions that are rigorously assessed for their impact on regulatory adherence. This means that any proposed optimization must be evaluated not only for its potential to reduce costs or increase speed, but also for its compliance with Nippon Yusen's internal policies, relevant maritime laws, and international conventions. This ensures that efficiency is achieved without compromising safety, environmental standards, or legal obligations. An approach that prioritizes cost reduction above all else is professionally unacceptable because it risks overlooking critical safety or environmental regulations. Such a focus could lead to the adoption of methods or technologies that, while cheaper, do not meet required standards, potentially resulting in accidents, pollution, or legal sanctions. Similarly, an approach that focuses solely on speed without considering the regulatory implications is flawed. Expediting processes without ensuring that all checks and balances mandated by regulations are in place can lead to errors, oversights, and ultimately, noncompliance. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past practices without verifying current regulatory requirements is also professionally unsound. Regulations evolve, and relying on outdated information can lead to unintentional violations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the current regulatory landscape relevant to the process being optimized. This should be followed by a systematic analysis of the process to identify areas for improvement. Proposed solutions must then undergo a detailed compliance review, considering all relevant laws, industry standards, and company policies. The decision should be based on a holistic assessment that weighs efficiency benefits against regulatory risks and ethical considerations, ensuring that any change enhances, or at the least maintains, the company's commitment to safety and compliance. Question 13. Implementation of a new digital cargo tracking system at Nippon Yusen is underway. To accelerate its adoption across the fleet, a proposal suggests bypassing the standard multi-departmental compliance review for initial pilot phases, focusing instead on user feedback and technical performance, which approach best balances process optimization with regulatory adherence for Nippon Yusen. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the new system's impact on all relevant maritime regulations and Nippon Yusen's internal compliance policies, involving legal and safety departments, before any pilot deployment. Option B. Implement the system with a focus on cost-effectiveness, assuming that standard operational procedures will inherently satisfy regulatory requirements. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment by relying solely on the IT department's technical assessment and initial user feedback, deferring detailed regulatory checks until after the system is fully operational. Option D. Proceed with a phased rollout, allowing individual vessel crews to adapt the system to their perceived operational needs, with compliance checks occurring only if specific issues are reported by the crew. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the new system's impact on all relevant maritime regulations and Nippon Yusen's internal compliance policies, involving legal and safety departments, before any pilot deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen employees tasked with optimizing operational processes, particularly concerning the implementation of new digital systems. The core difficulty lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and innovation with the absolute necessity of adhering to all relevant maritime regulations and internal company policies. Failure to do so can lead to significant operational disruptions, safety risks, and legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process improvements do not inadvertently compromise compliance. The correct approach involves a systematic and thorough review of all proposed process changes against the existing regulatory framework and Nippon Yusen's internal guidelines. This includes identifying potential impacts on safety, environmental protection, crew welfare, and reporting requirements. By proactively engaging with compliance officers and legal departments, and conducting pilot testing in controlled environments, Nippon Yusen can ensure that new digital systems are integrated in a manner that is both efficient and fully compliant. This aligns with the ethical duty of care and the legal obligation to operate vessels safely and in accordance with international and national maritime laws. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over comprehensive compliance checks would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the adoption of systems or processes that violate safety protocols, such as those mandated by the International Maritime Organization, IMO, or specific flag state regulations. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost reduction without considering the regulatory implications, could result in the selection of cheaper, less robust systems that fail to meet data security or operational integrity standards, thereby exposing Nippon Yusen to significant risks. Furthermore, bypassing established internal review procedures for the sake of expediency demonstrates a disregard for corporate governance and risk management, which are critical for maintaining operational integrity and reputation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the project's objectives, followed by a comprehensive risk assessment that explicitly includes regulatory compliance. This involves consulting relevant legal and compliance experts early in the process, documenting all compliance checks, and establishing clear escalation paths for any identified issues. The principle of compliance by design should be embedded, ensuring that regulatory considerations are integral to the design and implementation phases, rather than an afterthought. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates that, while Nippon Yusen aims to optimize vessel turnaround times at port, the current process for cargo handling documentation is experiencing significant delays, leading to extended port stays. This delay is attributed to a manual, paper-based system that requires multiple physical sign-offs from various departments before a vessel can be cleared for departure. Which of the following approaches best addresses this operational challenge for Nippon Yusen? Option A. Prioritize immediate vessel departure by allowing cargo handling documentation to be completed post-voyage, with a commitment to address any discrepancies later. Option B. Instruct port staff to expedite the manual sign-off process by allowing supervisors to approve documentation for multiple departments simultaneously. Option C. Implement a digital workflow system for cargo handling documentation, integrating real-time updates and electronic signatures, with a pilot program on select vessels before full rollout. Option D. Focus on increasing the number of personnel involved in the manual documentation process to speed up the physical handling of papers. Correct answer is C. Implement a digital workflow system for cargo handling documentation, integrating real-time updates and electronic signatures, with a pilot program on select vessels before full rollout. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen's operational teams by highlighting a potential disconnect between stated process optimization goals and actual implementation, which could impact efficiency, safety, and compliance. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the drive for improvement with the imperative to adhere to established maritime regulations and internal company policies. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven evaluation of the current process, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies through direct observation and stakeholder feedback, and then proposing targeted, measurable improvements that align with Nippon Yusen's strategic objectives and regulatory obligations. This method ensures that changes are not merely superficial but address root causes, are sustainable, and contribute positively to operational performance and safety standards, thereby upholding the company's commitment to responsible maritime operations as expected under relevant maritime governance frameworks. An approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on operational integrity or safety protocols is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to shortcuts that violate safety regulations or compromise the reliability of critical systems, potentially resulting in incidents and regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to implement changes based on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without rigorous validation. This lacks the necessary due diligence and can lead to ineffective or even detrimental changes that do not achieve the desired optimization and may introduce new risks. Finally, adopting a move fast and break things mentality, while sometimes applicable in other industries, is highly inappropriate in maritime operations where safety and adherence to strict protocols are paramount. This approach disregards the potential for severe consequences and the established regulatory environment governing shipping. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the existing process thoroughly, gathering comprehensive data, consulting with all relevant stakeholders, and evaluating proposed changes against established safety, environmental, and operational standards. This iterative process of analysis, proposal, implementation, and monitoring ensures that optimization efforts are effective, compliant, and contribute to the long-term success and reputation of Nippon Yusen. Question 15. During the evaluation of operational efficiency at Nippon Yusen, a team identifies a potential area for significant time savings in cargo handling procedures. The team proposes a revised workflow that, while faster, involves deviating from a specific, albeit seemingly minor, safety check mandated by internal company guidelines, and potentially conflicting with a general interpretation of international maritime safety best practices. What is the most appropriate course of action for the team to recommend to Nippon Yusen management? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed workflow, including a detailed review of relevant internal guidelines and international maritime regulations, and present findings and recommendations for modification or alternative solutions to management. Option B. Implement the revised workflow immediately to realize the time savings, as the safety check is perceived as redundant and the primary goal is efficiency. Option C. Proceed with the revised workflow, but instruct personnel to be extra vigilant during the cargo handling process to compensate for the omitted safety check. Option D. Seek informal approval from a senior manager for the revised workflow, emphasizing the efficiency gains, and address any potential compliance issues later if they arise. The correct answer is B. Implement the revised workflow immediately to realize the time savings, as the safety check is perceived as redundant and the primary goal is efficiency. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Nippon Yusen, as a global shipping company, operates within a complex web of international regulations and internal policies designed to ensure operational efficiency, safety, and compliance. The pressure to optimize processes, particularly in a competitive industry, can create a tension between achieving desired outcomes and adhering to established protocols. Careful judgment is required to balance the pursuit of efficiency with the imperative of regulatory adherence and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies through objective analysis, and proposing improvements that align with Nippon Yusen's operational standards and relevant maritime regulations. This includes consulting with relevant stakeholders, conducting thorough risk assessments for any proposed changes, and ensuring that all modifications are documented and implemented in a controlled manner. This approach is justified by the need for robust, sustainable, and compliant operational improvements, which are fundamental to maintaining Nippon Yusen's reputation and ensuring the safety and security of its operations, as mandated by international maritime conventions and company policy. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on safety or regulatory compliance would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to shortcuts that violate international maritime safety standards or environmental regulations, potentially resulting in severe penalties, operational disruptions, and reputational damage for Nippon Yusen. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without proper validation, risks introducing new inefficiencies or unforeseen problems. This lacks the rigor required for effective process optimization and could undermine the integrity of Nippon Yusen's operations. A third incorrect approach, bypassing established internal approval processes for proposed changes, demonstrates a disregard for corporate governance and risk management frameworks, which are crucial for maintaining order and accountability within a large organization like Nippon Yusen. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the problem thoroughly, gathering objective data, consulting relevant regulations and internal policies, engaging stakeholders, evaluating potential solutions based on their impact on efficiency, safety, and compliance, and implementing changes in a structured and monitored manner. Question 16. The control framework reveals that Nippon Yusen is exploring opportunities to streamline its cargo handling procedures to enhance efficiency. Which of the following approaches best balances operational optimization with the stringent regulatory and safety requirements inherent in maritime operations? Option A. Implementing changes based on a comparative analysis of similar processes in non-maritime industries, prioritizing the quickest and most cost-effective solutions. Option B. Making incremental changes to the existing process based on anecdotal feedback from a few operational staff, without formal documentation or broad consultation. Option C. Proceeding with the most technologically advanced cargo handling system available, assuming its inherent efficiency will automatically meet all operational and regulatory needs. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment involving all relevant departments, including safety and environmental officers, to evaluate potential impacts and ensure compliance with international maritime regulations and internal policies before any changes are made. The correct answer is A. Implementing changes based on a comparative analysis of similar processes in non-maritime industries, prioritizing the quickest and most cost-effective solutions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen employees by requiring them to navigate the complexities of process optimization within a strictly regulated maritime environment. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and cost reduction with the paramount importance of safety, environmental protection, and adherence to international maritime conventions and Nippon Yusen's internal policies. Misjudgments in process optimization can have severe consequences, including operational disruptions, financial penalties, reputational damage, and most critically, risks to human life and the marine ecosystem. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment and stakeholder consultation before implementing any process changes. This method is professionally sound because it prioritizes a systematic evaluation of potential impacts. By engaging with relevant departments, including safety officers, engineers, and operational staff, Nippon Yusen ensures that all perspectives are considered. This collaborative process allows for the identification of potential hazards, the assessment of compliance with all applicable regulations, such as the International Safety Management (ISM) Code (MARPOL), and relevant national maritime laws, and the development of mitigation strategies. This proactive and inclusive methodology aligns with the ethical imperative to operate safely and responsibly, and the regulatory requirement to maintain robust safety management systems. An incorrect approach would be to implement process changes based solely on cost-saving potential without a thorough risk assessment. This fails to acknowledge the inherent dangers in maritime operations and the stringent regulatory oversight. Such an approach risks violating safety protocols and environmental regulations, potentially leading to accidents or non-compliance. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of implementation over thoroughness, bypassing necessary consultations and approvals. This disregards the importance of due diligence and the collective expertise required to ensure that optimizations do not compromise operational integrity or safety standards. A third incorrect approach is to assume that a process that works in a different industry or context will automatically be suitable for Nippon Yusen's operations without specific adaptation and validation. This overlooks the unique operational demands and regulatory landscape of the maritime sector. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the objective of the process optimization. This should be followed by a detailed analysis of the current process, identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement. Crucially, this analysis must be conducted through the lens of regulatory compliance and safety. A thorough risk assessment involving all affected parties and considering potential impacts on safety, environment, and operational efficiency is essential. Subsequently, potential solutions should be evaluated not only for their efficiency gains, but also for their compliance and safety implications. The chosen solution should then be piloted, monitored, and reviewed before full implementation, with continuous feedback mechanisms in place. Question 17. Performance analysis shows a significant bottleneck in the port turnaround time for Nippon Yusen vessels, impacting overall fleet efficiency. A proposal has been put forward to streamline the pre-arrival notification process by reducing the number of mandatory data points submitted to port authorities, arguing that this will expedite clearance. What is the most appropriate course of action for Nippon Yusen to take in response to this proposal? Option A. Delegate the decision to the vessel's captain, empowering them to make the final call on data submission based on their immediate assessment of port requirements and efficiency needs. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed data reduction against all applicable international maritime regulations and Nippon Yusen's internal operational safety and compliance policies before any implementation. Option C. Proceed with the data reduction on a trial basis for a few select ports to gauge the impact on turnaround times, with the understanding that full implementation will follow if successful. Option D. Immediately implement the streamlined notification process to reduce turnaround times, as efficiency is a key performance indicator. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the streamlined notification process to reduce turnaround times, as efficiency is a key performance indicator. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Nippon Yusen, as a global shipping company, operates within a complex web of international maritime regulations and internal company policies designed to ensure safety, efficiency, and compliance. The pressure to optimize processes, especially in a competitive industry, can create tension with the imperative to adhere strictly to established protocols. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations, even with the intention of improving performance, can lead to severe consequences, including operational disruptions, financial penalties, reputational damage, and most critically, safety incidents. Careful judgment is required to balance the drive for efficiency with the non-negotiable requirements of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a thorough review and understanding of the relevant Nippon Yusen operational guidelines and applicable international maritime laws, such as those established by the International Maritime Organization, IMO, and flag state regulations. This approach prioritizes identifying any proposed process changes that might conflict with existing safety standards, environmental protection mandates, or crew welfare regulations. By consulting official documentation and seeking clarification from relevant departments, e.g., safety, operations, legal, Nippon Yusen personnel can ensure that any optimization efforts are implemented within the bounds of legal and ethical requirements. This proactive and compliant method upholds the company's commitment to responsible operations and mitigates risks. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or the perceived efficiency gains without verifying compliance. For instance, altering cargo loading procedures to save time without confirming they meet the stability and structural integrity requirements stipulated by maritime safety conventions would be a significant regulatory failure. Similarly, reducing crew rest periods to increase operational availability, even if it appears to boost immediate output, would violate international labor conventions and potentially compromise crew alertness, leading to safety risks. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass established reporting mechanisms for operational issues, assuming a quick fix is sufficient, as this undermines transparency and the ability to identify systemic problems that require formal attention and regulatory oversight. Professionals at Nippon Yusen should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objective, process optimization. This should be immediately followed by an assessment of potential impacts against established regulatory frameworks and internal policies. If any doubt exists regarding compliance, the next step is to consult relevant documentation and seek expert advice from internal departments or external legal counsel specializing in maritime law. Any proposed changes must undergo a formal risk assessment, and if necessary, a review by a compliance or safety committee before implementation. This systematic process ensures that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of safety, legality, or ethical standards. Question 18. The control framework reveals that Nippon Yusen is exploring process optimization initiatives to enhance operational efficiency. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the company's commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct within its operational jurisdiction? Option A. Implementing new operational procedures based on industry best practices observed at other maritime firms, assuming they meet general efficiency benchmarks. Option B. Conducting a comprehensive review of proposed process changes against all applicable Nippon Yusen internal policies and external regulatory requirements before implementation, seeking expert compliance validation. Option C. Streamlining reporting mechanisms by consolidating data points, even if it means omitting certain fields deemed less critical for immediate operational visibility. Option D. Prioritizing the adoption of the fastest and most cost-effective process improvements identified by operational teams, with a plan to address any regulatory concerns post-implementation. The correct answer is A. Implementing new operational procedures based on industry best practices observed at other maritime firms, assuming they meet general efficiency benchmarks. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Nippon Yusen employees tasked with optimizing internal processes. The challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of efficiency gains with the absolute necessity of adhering to the stringent regulatory framework governing maritime operations and corporate conduct, as defined by the Nippon Yusen hiring assessment test's specified jurisdiction. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations, even with the intention of improving operational flow, can lead to severe legal repercussions, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any process optimization initiative is not only effective, but also fully compliant. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing Nippon Yusen operational procedures against the relevant regulatory requirements and internal guidelines. This proactive assessment ensures that any proposed changes are vetted for compliance before implementation. This aligns with the principle of compliance by design, where regulatory adherence is integrated into the process from its inception. Specifically, this approach would involve consulting Nippon Yusen's internal compliance department and relevant maritime authorities' guidelines to confirm that proposed optimizations do not inadvertently violate safety standards, environmental regulations, or reporting obligations. This meticulous due diligence is ethically sound and legally mandated, safeguarding Nippon Yusen and its stakeholders. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over regulatory scrutiny would fail to uphold the company's commitment to lawful operations. For instance, adopting a new software system without verifying its data handling protocols against data privacy regulations would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Similarly, streamlining a reporting process by omitting mandatory data fields, even if it appears more efficient, directly contravenes regulatory requirements and could lead to penalties. Another flawed approach would be to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or the perceived efficiency of a new method, without formal validation against established Nippon Yusen policies and external regulations. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the established control framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the full scope of applicable regulations and internal policies. Before proposing or implementing any process change, they must conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, specifically evaluating potential regulatory and ethical implications. This involves seeking expert advice from compliance officers, legal counsel, and relevant operational specialists. The decision should then be guided by a clear hierarchy of priorities. Regulatory compliance and ethical conduct are paramount, followed by operational efficiency and cost-effectiveness. Any proposed optimization must demonstrably meet the highest standards in all these areas. Question 19. The audit findings indicate recurring discrepancies in the reconciliation of cargo manifests for Nippon Yusen's vessels. Which of the following approaches best addresses this issue to ensure process optimization and compliance? Option A. Increase the frequency of manual cross-referencing of manifest data by the documentation team without investigating the source of the errors. Option B. Defer addressing the discrepancies until a significant operational disruption occurs to gather more data on the impact. Option C. Issue a general directive to all staff involved in cargo handling to be more careful without specific guidance or training. Option D. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis to identify the underlying reasons for manifest discrepancies and implement targeted corrective actions. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis to identify the underlying reasons for manifest discrepancies and implement targeted corrective actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to Nippon Yusen's internal compliance policies and potentially relevant maritime regulations concerning cargo handling and documentation. The audit findings highlight a potential gap in process execution, which, if not addressed correctly, could lead to operational inefficiencies, increased risk of errors, and non-compliance. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause and implement a sustainable solution that upholds Nippon Yusen's commitment to operational excellence and regulatory integrity. The correct approach involves a thorough root cause analysis of the identified discrepancies in cargo manifest reconciliation. This means systematically investigating why the discrepancies are occurring, whether it's due to data entry errors, communication breakdowns between departments, inadequate training, or system limitations. Once the root cause is identified, implementing targeted corrective actions, such as refining data validation protocols, enhancing interdepartmental communication channels, or providing additional training, is crucial. This approach aligns with best professional practices by addressing the problem at its source, ensuring long-term process improvement, and minimizing future risks. It also implicitly supports adherence to any relevant maritime regulations that mandate accurate cargo documentation and reporting, thereby safeguarding Nippon Yusen's reputation and operational integrity. An incorrect approach would be to simply implement a superficial fix, such as increasing the frequency of manual checks, without understanding the underlying cause of the discrepancies. This fails to address the root issue and is likely to be a temporary band-aid, leading to continued inefficiencies and potential for recurring errors. It also risks overlooking systemic problems that could have broader implications for Nippon Yusen's operations. Another incorrect approach would be to blame individual employees without conducting a proper investigation. This fosters a negative work environment, discourages open communication, and fails to identify systemic issues that may be contributing to the problem. It is ethically unsound and professionally irresponsible to assign blame without due diligence. A third incorrect approach might be to ignore the audit findings altogether, assuming they are minor or will resolve themselves. This demonstrates a severe lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for internal controls and compliance, potentially exposing Nippon Yusen to significant risks, including regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a structured problem-solving framework. This involves clearly defining the problem based on audit findings, gathering relevant data, conducting a thorough root cause analysis, developing and evaluating potential solutions, implementing the chosen solution, and then monitoring its effectiveness. This systematic process ensures that solutions are not only effective in the short term, but also sustainable and contribute to continuous improvement within Nippon Yusen. Question 20. Stakeholder feedback indicates that certain operational processes on Nippon Yusen vessels could be streamlined to improve efficiency and reduce turnaround times in port. However, a recent internal audit highlighted potential risks associated with some of these proposed efficiencies, if not implemented with absolute priority on safety and regulatory compliance. Which of the following approaches best reflects the required professional conduct for Nippon Yusen in addressing this feedback? Option A. Focus solely on the efficiency and cost-saving aspects of the proposed changes, assuming that existing safety protocols are sufficient to mitigate any new risks. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment for each proposed process change, prioritizing those that demonstrably enhance safety and compliance alongside efficiency, and validate them against relevant maritime regulations and internal policies before implementation. Option C. Delegate the decision-making process for these operational changes to the individual vessel crews to allow for localized adaptation and faster implementation. Option D. Implement the proposed process changes immediately to capitalize on efficiency gains, with a plan to address any emergent safety concerns reactively. Correct answer is D. Implement the proposed process changes immediately to capitalize on efficiency gains, with a plan to address any emergent safety concerns reactively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Nippon Yusen, as a global shipping company, operates within a complex web of international regulations and industry best practices. Balancing efficiency gains with the absolute priority of safety and compliance requires careful judgment. The core tension lies in optimizing processes without compromising the stringent safety standards mandated by maritime law and industry guidelines, which are paramount for protecting human life, the environment, and the company's reputation. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven evaluation of proposed process changes, prioritizing those that demonstrably enhance safety and compliance alongside efficiency. This aligns with the fundamental principles of maritime safety management systems, which emphasize continuous improvement and risk mitigation. Specifically, any proposed optimization must undergo rigorous review against the International Maritime Organization (IMO) conventions, such as the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea (SOLAS) and the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships (MARPOL), as well as Nippon Yusen's own internal safety policies and procedures. The focus must be on ensuring that efficiency gains do not introduce new risks or dilute existing safety protocols. Implementing process changes without a thorough risk assessment and validation against regulatory requirements is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. For instance, prioritizing cost reduction over safety checks would violate SOLA's requirements for vessel integrity and operational safety. Similarly, streamlining communication channels in a way that could lead to misinterpretation of critical safety instructions would contravene established best practices for maritime communication and could have severe consequences, potentially leading to accidents or environmental incidents, thereby breaching MARPOL. Adopting a move fast and break things mentality, common in some tech industries, is entirely inappropriate in the maritime sector where the stakes are exceptionally high. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape and the company's safety culture. This involves identifying all relevant regulations and internal policies. Next, proposed process changes should be analyzed for their potential impact on safety, environmental protection, and operational efficiency. A risk assessment should be conducted for each proposed change, identifying potential hazards and developing mitigation strategies. Prioritization should be given to changes that offer clear benefits in all three areas, with safety and compliance being non-negotiable prerequisites. Stakeholder consultation, including input from crew, technical departments, and compliance officers, is crucial to ensure practical feasibility and adherence to operational realities.